Hey, deserving listeners. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast, and you are?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I make and sell Velcro condoms.
So last chapter during the patron zone, it was a long one, and we talked about Elon's statements about how evil his father was. We watched some interviews with Elon himself talking about that, interviews with his brother and his mom. You had a revelation, a psychological revelation about your own life. We cried.
Yeah, it was intense.
Particularly me. It was an interesting patron zone. But before moving on with my outline today, I found some more clips that I think are important to watch. So this is a clip from the YouTube channel Elon Musk Editor, and this is Elon Musk's mother.
Like, for example, when I always had to drive the car and he would be punching me and Elon would be between the seats hitting his father to stop him punching me. When he would be at home and punching me, Kimball and Tosca would be crying in the corner. Elon would be hitting his dad at the back of his legs. And then when he was 8, we left.
Thoughts on that?
That is such a vile, grim, horrible image.
Yeah.
The little 5-year-old is witnessing what they can't fully comprehend, but it's like one of their two, as we said in a previous episode, gods physically hurting the other god, and then is like, stop it, and like is trying to, without success, of course, physically intervene. That's horrific.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have heard or experienced stories of witnessing domestic violence in their parents, intimate partner violence, or have been through it themselves. And I obviously, as a clinician, have heard many stories from people. I've treated perpetrators. I've heard their stories. You get a sense over time, having heard several stories, of the degree, where they are on the spectrum. Not that always correlates with how much trauma someone goes through, but you get a sense of where you are in terms of the degree of the intimate partner violence. And there's been a lot of statements from the mom and from Elon about the father, but some details about that point in a direction as to where they are. The spectrum is, one, the mother is telling a story that would happen often. It wasn't an incident. Like, she was like, I remember one time, she's saying this is the sort of thing that would happen. So that's one marker of severity. Another is that she's describing a moment in which Errol is repeatedly hitting her, and to the degree that Elon would have eventually, because at first Elon probably wouldn't intervene.
Right.
But at a certain point, he started to try to save his mom. Just imagine the terror and hurt that a 5-year-old would be going through. And then another marker is that we didn't hear, and we can't really imagine, that as soon as the father realized, oh my God, my son is hitting me to defend his mother, I should stop. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. We're not hearing that, right?
No.
So imagine a man who is repeatedly hitting his wife to the point where the son is at 5, is intervening, and so small and so frail and weak. And the other kids are observing it too, because that's another thing we're hearing, is like all 3 of the kids were witnessing, but the father just doing it. So it says something about the severity, and it says something about potentially how much trauma Elon went through. You hear these stories, and you could have one of these incidents and say to yourself, wow, that must have really done a number on you.
Yeah.
To have it basically routinely occurring, and not only to your mom, but then to you, and the verbal abuse, it's severe.
It occurs to me, so, I've got 2 daughters, and there's so many times where I'll be having an argument with my wife about something. For whatever reason, I guess I know why. They usually will defend her, even if they don't know what the heck we're arguing about. They'll just assume that I'm being unreasonable, So it's like, Daddy, stop it, right? I find it admirable, they'll stand up. But there's been some times, I don't know exactly when, but I remember times, especially when they were younger, when like her and I were having a serious argument about something. And one of them would be like, stop arguing. And I remember because, as an adult, you kind of get in this mode of like, well, okay, the kid's saying something, but right now we're having this discussion. And I remember thinking, oh, this is so weird because they don't know what the heck's going on, but they don't like it. And they're asking to stop. And they seem so helpless about it. And that's not even someone hitting someone. So I just can't imagine the desperation. And my point is that in those moments that are really about trivial stuff, but to them it feels like mommy and daddy are arguing, there's a desperation to them. Like, stop it. This feels uncomfortable. Stop it, right?
Right.
I just can't imagine when you dial that up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the elements that you're highlighting is that for you and your wife, you're having a mild argument, a disagreement about something, or you're upset at each other, kind of. It's not like yelling or screaming, right? And then they start to chime in like, mommy, daddy, stop it. And you know in your head, either at the moment or soon after, because there are times when you'll have a little disagreement and the kids might hear it if they paid attention, but it's not severe enough or long enough or intense enough that the kids care to listen because they have their own things that they're interested in, like the TV show or whatever.
Exactly.
And so you're noting like, this must have been more intense. So you're noting that. You're also noting that this wouldn't be the first time. There's probably a threshold where they finally decide to chime in, right? Where there's a zone where they're uncomfortable and they're noticing, and it's harmful to them on some level, but they're not ready to say something. And so for them to say something, you're thinking, I need to we went way past the threshold here.
Yeah, their level of comfort was way exceeded.
Yeah.
And without context, because it's one thing to, and certainly as they got older, it's sort of easier to have these conversations, but you can be like, okay, look, we have a disagreement right now. We're gonna work it out, but you can provide context. But especially when they're younger and when you are not providing context, it really must feel. In fact, I sort of have vague memories as a kid, not being really little, because when it would have been really ugly, I would have been like 2. So I don't have a memory of me thinking, I need to stop this, because I didn't even know what was going on. But I'm talking about more when I was maybe like 5, 6, 7, that range. I remember a couple times where my dad was arguing with my grandma about something, pretty intense argument. And I remember that feeling of like, I need to try to stop this, because you kind of feel like, well, first of all, you feel this isn't, I don't feel okay right now. Like this. And second, even though it's weird as a kid that you would feel responsibility, I guess because as you were saying in another episode, you are self-centered as a child. It feels like, I guess I have to do something about this because the adults aren't.
Right.
So you feel like you need to step in.
Right. It's not like watching two people fight. I mean, I've watched you and your wife fight before.
Yeah.
And it's not comfortable for me either, but I am a grown adult, so I can differentiate in the moment and after and say that, well, it's not really affecting me personally.
Right.
It's distressful kind of, but I can separate myself.
Yeah, like you in those moments may have an opinion or whatever, but it's not your parents. It's not your,
But to speak to what you were saying of just the self-centeredness of it, they can't differentiate themselves from what's happening. So,
right.
Language doesn't really help because we don't really have language for this other than to say, if you guys are going through something, they're going through it in the way that they perceive it, right? Because you and your wife might be thinking, this is just a little, we'll get over this. But they're perceiving it as not such, and they can't say, well, that's my parents. I'll just be here. Like they don't have that ability. I mean, they develop it, little by little as they age, but they don't, especially at 5, especially if you've been through a lot, you perceive it as completely of you, and you also, you don't have any way to self-soothe. So, let's take a break, and when we get back, let's watch another clip that I found with Elon Musk's second wife, because it took me a while to actually find what she would say about Elon Musk. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay, we're back from the break. So this is a clip also from the YouTube channel Elon Musk Editor, and this is with Tallulah Riley, Elon Musk's second wife.
He'd forgotten to get me a Christmas present. We were in Boulder, Colorado, so there's loads and loads of snow. And we were in bed And he said, I do, he's not that I don't love you. I do really, really love you. It's like, my brain is exploding.
So if you didn't catch that, she's talking about how they're in Boulder, Colorado, and there's a lot of snow around Christmas time, and he had forgotten to get her a Christmas present, but he was going through a tremendous amount of stress around his businesses. I think that she might be recalling the very beginning of their relationship during that really rough year when SpaceX and everything else was about to tank.
And I was like, no, I know, it's fine. And he sort of got up in the middle of the night and disappeared. And he came back 2 hours later, and he'd gone outside in his T-shirt and shorts, barefoot, and he'd gone and dug through the snow and picked flowers. I just wanted to show you how much I loved you.
So thoughts on that?
That sounds so cold. He was not warmed up. It's one of these cinematic gestures. I've done stuff like this before too. I think a lot of us that grew up in this generation sort of developed this notion of, okay, if you screw up or if you're trying to win someone over or whatever, you got to make these grand boombox over the head gestures, right? And the more you suffer in the process, the more it shows how much you care. So in his case, he's like, all right, I didn't get a gift. I'll go out. I'm not even going to get put on warm clothes, so I'll risk my death, I guess, and I'll go pick flowers because this will show that I really care and love. And I get it. I mean, I've done that kind of stuff. The recklessness and impulsivity, a different way to think about it. And I'm not even criticizing him. I'm saying for me, because I've done stuff like this where I don't realize that, wait a minute, actually, by me either being gone right now or going to spend money impulsively to try to make something up, instead of maybe just being with the person, maybe using the time to just be together or something. It's an interesting trade, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. She said he disappeared for 2 hours.
Right.
So she's like, huh? All right. Another statement by her about Elon Musk's emotionality. Let's watch that.
He has a kind of innocence to him. He feels with incredible purity the emotion that he is feeling at the time, whatever that emotion is. He feels things very, very deeply. So, I've heard it said that he's cold and emotionless, and that could not be further from the truth. He is the most emotional person I know. We were watching some comedy, and Elon found the film so funny that he literally fell on the floor and was rolling around, holding his tummy, laughing. He feels things. And, if he feels anger, it's there. I think his childhood shaped him in a lot of ways. I think he knows what it's like to be bottom of the pack, to be hurt by people that you should be able to trust. And obviously, I think that leaves scars.
Thoughts on that?
Does someone feel emotions, right? And in her descriptions, oh, trust me, he feels emotions very strongly, and she gives some examples of feeling laughter, like happiness or finding something funny. And she mentions anger. It's if he's angry, it, which is interesting. And I don't doubt it, but there is that. And then there's another flip of that coin, which is empathetically sensing someone else's emotions and then reacting appropriately to that, right? And now I don't know, that account didn't include a description of that. But I wonder if a lot of times when people say that about Musk, because maybe this would be what I would say, it's because he seems to not react appropriately to other people's suffering and problems.
Yeah.
Like his workers or people on Twitter or people that in interviews or advertisers, all these kinds of things where it's well, that's not him not feeling, it's him not caring about how someone else is feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings about personality and emotion in the public. I could speculate as to how that progressed. I think that at some point it was told to the public either just from an expert or through a character like Dexter or something that there's this type of person that's a psychopath. They don't have empathy and they don't have emotion. They don't understand. They're basically like an alien. They observe other people's feelings from afar and wonder what's going on. Sometimes people with autism are described this way. It is a complete fantasy. It's a cartoon. It's non-existent. I mean, some people have trouble with emotions. Some people have trouble expressing their emotions. Psychopathic people can have trouble with emotional expression, can have attenuated emotions for sure. But it's this notion that I guess we could even blame Star Trek, like Spock or Data or something.
Sure.
There's this fantasy, and I think that for a lot of people, I think particularly boys and men who are raised to strive for stoicism and complete control, Clint Eastwood, that kind of thing, that it's a fantasy that is appealing, that you can be this cold, calculated, logical genius, and you don't have pesky emotions that are bothering you, because for these individuals, all children are generally shamed for their emotions too much, but boys and men are particularly shamed for it. So they're walking around with tremendous pain, as anyone would, even if they're raised even pretty much well. You're still going to have sadness and pain and distress and self-doubt, but people aren't allowed to feel those feelings, particularly boys and men. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just turn it off? And that is often the first defense that people will turn to. So I think it's kind of based on that, because there's some romanticism around these characters and these personality types. So as you're saying, one can be, to the public, seemingly very emotionless because they don't seem to exhibit compassion to the people that you want them to have compassion towards, which is the thing, because they might say, and their fans might say, he has tremendous compassion for people like me, but that's different than the presence of emotions. One of the things that we're hearing, and I didn't know this until I found this clip, that he does have big emotions behind the scenes, which is interesting. And the way she talks about it, I would suspect that it's because he either, late in life found emotion and was allowed to feel them, and or he wasn't attuned to properly enough growing up, such that he has a grasp on his emotions and on how to soothe himself and how to understand them. The way that she describes him, it almost sounds like a child, an immature. Right. When you talk about kids, 10-year-olds, they have big emotions. Yeah, they are angry, and and they're sad, and and they're happy, and
and they're rolling around on the floor in a theater. That would be a 10-year-old thing to do,
right,
for sure.
Right. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's a lesser developed thing. One could argue that as an adult, to not roll around on the ground is us suppressing our needs in some ways. Pros and cons. But I would suspect, and we'll get into it later in terms of, I think, how this manifests for a public face, is he doesn't have a way of knowing what he's going through or helping himself with it. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not enough such that he doesn't shoot himself in the foot, as I think he has been doing. So
one thing I was going to add is that when I was, the younger I was, and it wasn't like it ended suddenly, it just got better over time, I didn't really care about other people. I mean, I cared on a superficial level. Like if I saw someone suffering, I'm like, oh, geez, we should do something. But I was just very, very self-centered. And most kids are like that, and then you just kind of start growing out. It took me a long time to grow out of it. But I didn't know. And a lot of people that would have, I think if you had asked a lot of people that knew me, like, does Humberto have emotions? Oh, yeah, definitely. They would have even said similar things. Like, he rolls around laughing, or he if he's angry, you'll know it. Or maybe not so much the anger one, but a lot of emotions, right? And yet, if you ask people that knew me casually, I suggest that a good percentage of them might say something like, yeah, but he seems like only cares about himself, or he doesn't really seem to pay attention to others, or stuff like that.
He's not compassionate.
It was more about like not even necessarily noticing or something, The reason I'm bringing that up is because obviously, like Elon Musk and myself, in terms of personality, like we're very different how we behave in general, right? But I can relate to the aspect that I think he has. He just has it like maybe way more of being like self-centered, and being self-centered both in the bad way, but also just definitionally, I'm an only child. I live in a world of adults. Everyone's left me. I'm going to be self-centered.
You're talking about yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel, even though he wasn't an only child and all these things, I feel like through all his damage, he probably also had to become self-centered. Yeah. Except like way more.
Yeah. Right. All right. Let's take a break. We get back. I want to get to maybe the pinnacle of this entire analysis. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay. We're back from the break. So I want to highlight, we've already talked about this to some extent, but his father was physically and emotionally abusive to a high degree. His parents divorced when Elon was 8 or 9. I've heard both. Elon asked to live with his dad. He lived with his mom at first, but then pretty quickly wanted to live with his dad. Right. And we have to ask why. We don't know. I've heard a number of different reasons. The reason the mom gives is that he wanted to read the father's encyclopedias because he read a lot, right? And the mom said she couldn't afford to have all those encyclopedias, several different volumes, right? That seems like a possibility, maybe a conscious reason, but I can't imagine that being a primary reason, but who knows? Also, it seems possible that Elon would be trying to gain approval from his dad. It's a well-known phenomenon that for divorcing families, the child will sometimes try to please the parent that is the most problematic as a parent, and they will dump on the parent that is healthy or more healthy. It would be a common story that a family would come to me and the primary custody parent would be working hard to provide and love the kids, and this fly-by-night parent would be coming in and out of the children's lives, and the kids would just be worshiping the fly-by-night parent and completely shitting on the primary custody parent, and the primary custody parent's looking at me like, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. And eventually I came to the realization that isn't unique to me, but that they're suffering. They feel safe with the primary custody parent so that they can be themselves and they can express and dump all their issues and their anger. They can displace onto the parent, but they can't do that to the fly-by-night parent because they believe, and maybe logically, rightfully so, that if they threaten that relationship, then they'll completely lose that parent, which they are desperate to not have happen.
Plus, there's the fun aspect of like, they're arriving, they brought gifts, they're taking me somewhere. It's just kind of like this.
Yeah.
Like, I remember feeling this as a kid. I lived in Colombia, and we'd have visitors to the house a lot. Sometimes it was my aunt visiting from the United States. My dad, when he was living by himself in the United States, and would come back for Christmas. And it wasn't just me. It was like the whole family would light up. Like, oh, these people are coming. They're bringing gifts. They're from another place. It was a big deal. And let alone for me, because, of course, my aunt was like my second mom, and my dad was my dad. So it really felt special to see them, even though you would think you might be like, especially with my dad or something, like, I'm upset. You're not here more often. What's wrong? Instead, it's like, oh, it's this great treat.
Right. But anyway, another possibility as to why Elon wanted to live with the dad is because, quote unquote, boys should live with their dads. The brother would eventually move in with the dad for that reason. So I don't know if Elon had a similar thing. It doesn't make any logical sense, but you could see how some people would think that. Also, from reports, South Africa has a particularly traditional gender role society. Again, this is the 70s, so it's probably even more so that I don't know. But anyway, so Elon Musk has talked about these were particularly bad years, when he wasn't living with his mom and only with his dad, because the abuse escalated. One could imagine that without the mom there to be a buffer, then there's no longer that buffer. Also, it's not uncommon for parents like the father, Errol, to transfer his anger and his venting towards one of the children because the mom is no longer around to do that.
And plus, he's getting older, so he looks like an even easier, more legit target or whatever. Like,
yeah,
he's looking like a teenager. Hit him.
Right. Yeah. And there might be some personality or behavioral similarities between the child and the mother. Anyway, so I want to watch a video here, and this is the big reveal that I want to give to you. Okay. That you apparently have never even heard of before.
Nope.
Which, to me, when I came across this, I was like, what? And then I started going down all these different roads to try to get more information. And this is the point this was later on when I was researching everything, that I suddenly had chills thinking, did I just figure something out? Mm-hmm. And I don't hear people talking about this, right? Which makes me wonder if I'm just not uncovering those, not overturning those rocks, or I'm wrong-headed. But first, let's take a break, and the rest will be for patrons of the podcast. So,
dun dun dun, he's an alien.
So, become a patron if you want to listen to the rest of this. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
You deserve it.